3 months after the rescue of the Zephyrian survivors, the Galactic Council chambers on the diplomatic world of Nexus Prime buzzed with unprecedented tension. Representatives from dozens of species filled the circular assembly hall, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that normally represented the proud diversity of galactic civilization. Today, however, that diversity was united in one emotion, barely contained outrage. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat calmly at the human delegation's assigned seat, her dark eyes scanning the hostile faces surrounding her. As Earth's chief diplomat to the Galactic Council, she had faced difficult situations before, but never quite like this. The formal charges against humanity were displayed on the massive holographic screen above the assembly. Violation of Council protocols, unauthorized military operations, and disruption of established political boundaries. The Altarian representative, a tall being with crystalline skin that reflected the chamber's lights, stood to address the assembly. Esteemed colleagues, we are here today because the humans have once again demonstrated their inability to respect the established order that maintains peace throughout our galaxy. Their unauthorized rescue operation in the Kepler 442 system has set a dangerous precedent that threatens the very foundation of our diplomatic system. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Centauran delegate, resembling a cross between an octopus and a butterfly with flowing tentacle wings, added their voice to the chorus. The human government was specifically informed that the Zephyrian situation was classified as a non-priority emergency due to political complexities. Their intervention has disrupted carefully maintained territorial agreements and upset the balance of power in that sector. Elena remained seated, her expression neutral despite the growing chorus of accusations. She had expected this moment from the day Captain Chun's report reached Earth. The political establishment of the galaxy was predictably furious that humanity had acted without their permission. But she was prepared for this fight. Furthermore, continued the Andromedan representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, the humans have provided aid to a species that was in violation of settlement protocols. The Zephyrian colony ship was attempting to establish an unauthorized colony in disputed territory. May I remind this assembly, interjected the delegate from the Tausetian Confederation, that proper channels exist for emergency response? The humans completely bypassed the Council's emergency response protocols, potentially interfering with ongoing negotiations between involved parties. Elena finally stood, her movement causing the chamber to fall silent. At 5 feet 6 inches tall, she was dwarfed by many of the alien species around her. But her presence commanded attention nonetheless. Honorable delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the vast chamber. I've listened to your concerns about protocols and procedures, about territorial disputes and political complexities. But I noticed that, in all these eloquent speeches about the importance of following proper channels, not one of you has mentioned the 47,000 Zephyrian lives that were hanging in the balance. The chamber erupted in angry chittering, clicking, and other forms of alien disapproval, but Elena continued undaunted. 31,000 of those people died while this council debated jurisdiction and worried about territorial agreements. 16,000 more would have died if humanity had waited for your permission to act. The Altarian representative's crystalline surface flared with indignant light. The humans demonstrate exactly the kind of emotional thinking that makes them unsuitable for advanced galactic civilization. Decisions must be made rationally, based on larger strategic considerations rather than mere sentiment. Sentiment? Elena's voice carried a dangerous edge that silenced the chamber. You call preserving life sentiment? You call basic decency and emotional weakness? She activated her personal holographic display, and the chamber was suddenly filled with images from the rescue operation. Zephyrian children playing games with human crew members, Dr. Warren working alongside Zephyrian medics to save lives, Chief Martinez and Zephyrian engineers collaborating to restore power to the dying ship. These are the results of our emotional thinking, Elena declared. 16,000 people who are alive today, because humanity chose action over bureaucracy, compassion over politics. The vegan representative, a mantis-like creature with multifaceted eyes, raised a clawed appendage. The humans fail to understand the broader implications of their actions. What happens when every species begins ignoring council protocols in the name of emergency response? What happens to the order that has maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years? Elena smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. You want to know what happens when species start ignoring your protocols? Let me tell you exactly what happens. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show recent news feeds from across the galaxy. The Bellatrix system reported their first unauthorized rescue operation last week, when the Rigelians sent ships to aid miners trapped in a collapsed asteroid facility. The miners were from a species the Rigelians had been feuding with for 2 centuries, but they sent help anyway. The display updated again. The Proxima Centauri Defense Force violated 3 different territorial agreements to provide medical aid to a plague outbreak in disputed space. They saved 200,000 lives and asked permission afterward. More images flashed across the display. The Arcturus Trade Federation broke their own trade embargo to deliver food supplies to a famine-stricken world. The Pleiades Alliance ignored diplomatic protests to rescue the crew of a disabled exploration vessel. Elena looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who were beginning to look distinctly uncomfortable. Do you know what all these violations have in common? They've all been credited to something. The galactic media is calling the human standard. The idea that sometimes doing what's right matters, more than doing what's politically convenient. The Andromedan delegates' energy form flickered with agitation. This is exactly what we feared. The humans are encouraging chaos and disregard for established order throughout the galaxy. No, Elena replied firmly. We're encouraging something far more dangerous to your established order. We're encouraging conscience. She walked to the center of the chamber, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. For 3,000 years, this council has maintained peace through rigid protocols and careful political balance. But you've confused order with justice, stability with compassion. You've created a galaxy where 47,000 people can die in space while their supposed allies debate jurisdiction. The chamber was completely silent now, the weight of Elena's words settling over the assembled delegates like a heavy blanket. The Zephyrian survivors have something to say about humanity's emotional thinking. Elena continued, activating her communicator. Elder Kethfer, please join us. The elderly Zephyrian appeared via holographic projection, his pale blue skin showing the renewed health that came from proper medical care and nutrition. Around him, dozens of other Zephyrian survivors came into view, including children who had been near death just 3 months ago. Honorable delegates of the Galactic Council, Elder Kethfer began, his voice carrying the quiet dignity of his species. I stand before you as a representative of the 16,000 Zephyrian people who are alive today because one species chose compassion over politics. He paused, his large eyes surveying the chamber with an expression that somehow managed to be both gentle and accusatory. We were abandoned by our allies, ignored by our trading partners, and forgotten by the very council that claims to represent galactic civilization. Only humanity answered our call for help. A young Zephyrian child stepped forward, her small voice somehow carrying clearly through the communication system. The human doctors fixed my breathing when I couldn't breathe anymore. The human engineers brought back the lights when everything was dark. Why are you angry at them for helping us? The innocence of the question hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates looked away, unable to meet the child's questioning gaze. Elder Kethfer continued. The humans have invited our survivors to establish a new colony in their territory. They have offered us citizenship, education for our children, and full integration into human society. They ask nothing in return except that we live good lives and remember their kindness. Elena stepped forward again. The Galactic Council wants to punish humanity for saving lives. They want to impose sanctions on us for choosing conscience over politics. Let them try. She activated another holographic display showing the current political situation across the galaxy. 17 species have already announced their withdrawal from Council emergency response protocols, choosing to adopt the human standard instead. The Zephyrians have formally applied to join the Human Alliance as our first non-human member species. The display showed more data that made several delegates gasp audibly. Galactic opinion polls show that 73% of civilian populations across all species approve of humanity's actions in the Zephyrian rescue. Support for the human stand. The used Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and the crew immediately understood why the Galactic Council had written off the Zephyrian colonists. The colony ship's sanctuary hung dead in space, slowly tumbling end over end with no apparent signs of life. Its massive hull, nearly 3 kilometers of dark metal and composite materials, looked like a derelict tomb drifting through the void. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Commander Jackson as the main view screen displayed the full scope of the disaster. Emergency lights flickered sporadically along the ship's hull, and several sections showed clear signs of catastrophic decompression. Debris fields of frozen atmosphere and personal effects created a haunting constellation around the dying vessel. Captain Sarah Chun stood at the center of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she absorbed every detail of the scene before them. "Full sensor sweep, all frequencies. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Ensign Rodriguez's fingers flew across her console as she tried to establish communication with the sanctuary. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple life signs throughout the ship, but they're concentrated in only 4 of the 12 life support sections. The rest appear to be completely dead." "That's still better than we feared," Dr. Warren's voice came over the come from sickbay. 4 sections means we're looking at maybe 16,000 survivors instead of the full 47,000. The mathematics of tragedy, Sarah thought grimly. 31,000 people were already dead, but 16,000 could still be saved if they acted quickly enough. "Captain, I'm receiving a weak transmission from the sanctuary," Rodriguez reported, adjusting her equipment to boost the signal. "It's very faint, but I think I can clean it up." The bridge speakers crackled to life with a voice speaking in heavily. Accented Standard Galactic, the universal language used for interspecies communication. "Unknown vessel, this is Elder Kethver of the colony ship Sanctuary. If you are receiving this transmission, please know that we have lost hope. Our people are dying and we accept our fate. But if any record of our journey survives, let it be known that the Zephyrian people lived with honor." Sarah stepped forward. "Rodriguez, open a channel. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earthship Defiance. Elder Kethver, we are here to help. Please respond." The silence stretched for nearly a minute before the speakers crackled again. This time the voice carried a note of disbelief. "Captain Chun? Did you say Earthship?" But the Galactic Council assured us that no species would respond to our distress call. "The Galactic Council doesn't speak for humanity," Sarah replied firmly. "We're here to get your people to safety. Can you provide us with a detailed status report on your ship's condition?" What followed was a litany of cascading disasters that painted a picture of a ship dying from the inside out. The sanctuaries. Main engines had failed 3 weeks ago, followed by the primary power grid. One by one, life support sections had shut down as backup power was exhausted. The Zephyrians had managed to keep 4 sections operational by cannibalizating power from the rest of the ship, but even those were failing. "Elder, we're detecting approximately 16,000 life signs on your ship. Is that accurate?" Sarah asked. "Sadly accurate, Captain Chun. We began this journey with 47,000 souls. The others," the Elder's voice trailed off, heavy with grief. "The others have gone to join the eternal sky." Chief Martinez appeared on the bridge with Lieutenant Park, both of them studying data tablets filled with engineering specifications. "Captain, I've got good news and bad news," Martinez announced. "The good news is that we can definitely jury-rig a power connection to stabilize their remaining life support sections. The bad news is that their ship is more damaged than we initially thought." "Explain," Sarah ordered. Park activated a holographic display showing cross-sections of the sanctuary. "The structural damage is extensive. Several hull breaches, internal bulkhead failures, and the artificial gravity in two of their active sections is starting to fluctuate. Even if we restore power, the ship itself might not hold together much longer. Sarah studied the display, her mind working through the logistics of an evacuation. How long do we have? Best case scenario, if we can stabilize their power grid. Maybe 4 days before catastrophic structural failure, Martinez replied. Worst case, the ship breaks apart in 18 hours. And our cargo capacity? We can take about 800 people immediately if we pack them into every available space on the Defiance, Jackson reported. But Captain, I've got better news. I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching from the direction of Sol System. The tactical display updated to show 5 additional ships dropping out of hyperspace at various points around the system. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she recognized the configurations of human vessels racing to join the rescue operation. Captain, this is Commander Walsh aboard the UES Marathon, came a voice over the long-range communicator. We're here to help with the evacuation. What's our situation? Sarah quickly briefed the arriving ships on their assessment of the sanctuaries, condition, and the time constraints they were facing. The Marathon was a heavy cruiser with substantial cargo capacity, while the other ships included 2 frigates, a medical vessel, and the cargo hauler New Horizon loaded with emergency supplies. Here's what we're going to do, Sarah announced, addressing both her crew and the captains of the arriving ships. The Defiance and the medical ship will dock with the sanctuary to begin immediate evacuation of critical patients and establish our power transfer. Marathon and the cargo ships will begin setting up a temporary shelter station using their modular emergency habitats. We're going to save every single one of those 16,000 people. The next several hours became a carefully orchestrated dance of rescue operations that would have been impossible for any single ship. The Defiance maneuvered alongside the massive Zephyrian vessel, extending docking tubes to connect with their airlocks. The first humans to board the sanctuary were met with a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The Zephyrians were a graceful species, tall and slender with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes. But the survivors they encountered were weak from hunger and the stress of slowly dying in space. Children huddled against adults in corridors lit only by emergency lighting, while the elderly lay in improvised medical areas receiving what little care could be provided with failing equipment. Dr. Warren immediately established triage areas, working alongside Zephyrian medical personnel to identify the most critical cases for immediate evacuation. Captain, their biology is more similar to ours than I initially thought, she reported over her communicator. Most human medical techniques will work on them, but they're suffering from severe malnutrition and respiratory problems from the failing life support. Meanwhile, Chief Martinez and his engineering team performed what could only be described as miraculous work. Working in the dark, cramped engine spaces of the alien ship, they managed to splice human fusion reactor output into the Zephyrian power grid. The moment the connection was established, lights began coming back on throughout the sanctuary's surviving sections. Elder Kethfer, who had insisted on meeting the human rescue teams personally despite his obvious weakness, stood in the sanctuary's main assembly hall as power was restored. Tears streamed down his blue cheeks as he addressed his people in their native language, then turned to Captain Chun. Captain, in all the long history of the Zephyrian people, we have never encountered such selfless courage from another species. You came to help us when our own allies abandoned us. Why? Sarah looked around at the hall filled with Zephyrian families holding each other, children playing again now that the lights were back on, and elderly individuals receiving medical care from Dr. Warren's team. Elder Kethfer, there are some things that transcend politics and species boundaries. When people need help, you help them. It's that simple. But surely your government, your leaders must have authorized this rescue? Sarah smiled. Actually, our leaders told us to use our best judgment as human beings. Sometimes that's all the authorization you need. Over the next 2 days, the human fleet worked around the clock to evacuate the sanctuary's survivors. The Marathon's emergency habitats were configured into a temporary space station, providing comfortable quarters for the Zephyrian families while longer-term arrangements could be made. The cargo vessel New Horizon turned out to be loaded with exactly the kinds of supplies the survivors needed: food, medical equipment, and clothing in various sizes. But the most remarkable aspect of the rescue wasn't the technical achievement or the logistics. It was watching human crew members teaching Zephyrian children games to keep them entertained during the evacuation, or seeing Dr. Warren working tirelessly alongside Zephyrian doctors to save lives, or observing engineers from both species collaborating to keep the sanctuary's remaining systems operational. "Captain Chun," Elder Kethver said during one of their planning meetings, "I must ask you something that has been troubling me. The other species of the Galactic Council, they had the resources to help us. Some of them had much larger fleets than humanity. Why do you think they refused?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think sometimes when civilizati..." The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a dying scream, broadcasting on every known frequency across the Galactic Council's communication networks. Captain Sarah Chun watched the holographic display flicker to life on the bridge of the UES Defiance, her dark eyes scanning the desperate message that had been repeating for 3 standard days. "Captain, we're receiving the distress signal from the Kepler 442 system again," reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson, his fingers dancing across the navigation console. "It's the same message. The Zephyrian colony ship Sanctuary is requesting immediate evacuation assistance. They're reporting massive system failures and only have days before life support completely shuts down." Sarah leaned back in her command chair, studying the tactical display that showed their current position relative to the crisis. The Defiance was a mid-range exploration vessel, not exactly built for large-scale rescue operations. But they were the only human ship within reasonable distance of the emergency. "How many souls are we talking about, Jackson?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer would be staggering. "According to their last transmission, approximately 47,000 Zephyrians, Captain. Men, women, and their young." The colony ship was supposed to reach their new homeworld in the Andromeda sector, but they've been drifting for weeks after their main engines failed. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. 47,000 lives hanging in the balance, and according to the intercepted Council communications they'd been monitoring, not a single member species had responded to the distress call. "Sir?" Ensign Rodriguez spoke up from the communications station, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I've been monitoring Council channels. The Altarians declined assistance, claiming their rescue fleets are committed to protecting their trade routes. The Centauran Alliance won't respond because apparently there's some old, territorial dispute with the Zephyrians from 2 centuries ago. Even the Andromedans are refusing to help their own colonists because of some bureaucratic nonsense about unauthorized settlement attempts." Sarah felt her jaw clench. The Galactic Council liked to pride itself on being a beacon of civilized cooperation among the stars. But when it really mattered, politics and old grudges always seemed to take precedence over basic decency. "What about the other human ships in the sector?" Sarah asked, pulling up the fleet deployment charts on her personal display. "The closest is the UES Marathon, but they're still 8 days out even at maximum burn," Jackson replied. "The rescue ship UES Mercy is in dock at Earth Station Alpha for major repairs." "We're it, Captain." Sarah stood and walked to the main view screen, gazing out at the star-filled void. Somewhere out there, 47,000 beings were slowly dying while the so-called civilized galaxy turned its back on them. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their skill in agriculture and their gentle nature. They had never harmed anyone, never started wars or engaged in the kind of political maneuvering that seemed to consume most of the Council species. "Captain," Dr. Elizabeth Warren's voice came over the come from sickbay, "I've been reviewing the medical data from the Zephyrian distress signal. Their physiology isn't that different from humans. If we can get them aboard, I can treat most conditions. The main concern will be space and supplies. How many can we realistically take aboard the Defiance?" Sarah asked, though she was already running calculations in her head. Our ship is designed for a crew of 200, Jackson said, consulting his displays. In emergency conditions, we could probably pack in maybe 800 people total, but that would be pushing every system to its absolute limit. 800 out of 47,000, Sarah murmured. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. Even if they stripped every non-essential system and packed people into cargo holds, they couldn't possibly save everyone. Captain, Rodriguez interrupted, her voice excited. I'm receiving a response from Earth Command. They're ordering all available human vessels to converge on our position. The main screen shifted to display the familiar blue and green marble of humanity's homeworld, with Admiral Patricia Hayes appearing via quantum entanglement communication. The Admiral's weathered face bore the expression of someone who had seen too many wars and too much suffering. Captain Chin, you're probably looking at an impossible situation out there, Admiral Hayes began without preamble. The Council has officially declared the Zephyrian situation a non-priority emergency due to political complications. That means we're on our own if we want to help these people. Understood, Admiral. What are our orders? Your orders are to use your best judgment as a human being. Hayes replied, her voice carrying decades of command authority. But I can tell you that the marathon is burning hard to reach you, and I've got 3 more ships diverting from other missions. The cargo hauler New Horizon is loaded with emergency supplies and will reach you in 2 days. The question is whether you can keep those Zephyrians alive long enough for us to mount a proper rescue. Sarah felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. The responsibility that came with command in desperate situations. Admiral, our ship can't hold 47,000 people. We'll need to make multiple trips or find another solution. Captain, I'm transmitting the complete technical specifications of the Zephyrian colony ship. Your engineering team might find something useful. The data stream began flowing across their systems. And Captain? The entire galaxy is watching this. Every species that turned their back on these people is going to see what humanity does when others are in need. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other across a gulf of impossible choices. Sarah returned to her command chair and began reviewing the incoming data about the sanctuary. The colony ship was massive, nearly 3 kilometers long, but most of its systems were failing cascadingly. Engineering, this is the captain. Chief Martinez, report to the bridge immediately with your best systems analyst. Within minutes, Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez arrived with Lieutenant Sarah Park, the ship's most experienced systems specialist. Martinez was a compact man with grease-stained hands and the kind of intuition that came from decades of keeping ships running against all odds. Captain, I've been looking at these Zephyrian ship specs, Martinez said, activating a holographic display of the sanctuary. Their colony ship is basically a flying city. The main problem isn't just the engines, their entire power grid is cascading into failure. But here's the thing that might save them. Their ship was designed with modular life support sections. Lieutenant Park stepped forward, highlighting sections of the ship in different colors. The sanctuary has 12 independent life support zones, each capable of sustaining about 4,000 people. If we could restore power to even a few of these sections and stabilize their orbit, we could buy time for a proper evacuation. Sarah studied the display, her mind racing through possibilities. How long would it take to rig our fusion reactors to provide auxiliary power to their ship? If we strip our secondary reactor and jury-rig a power transfer system? Martinez scratched his beard thoughtfully. Maybe 8 hours of hard work, but it would leave us vulnerable if anything went wrong. And transferring people? Sarah asked. We could start immediately with shuttles and emergency pods, Jackson offered. Begin with their most vulnerable, young, elderly, sick. Our medical bay could handle the worst cases while we work on the bigger solution. Sarah made her decision. Jackson, lay in a course for the Kepler 442 system, maximum burn. Martinez, start stripping that secondary reactor and designing a power transfer system. Rodriguez, send a message to the sanctuary letting them know help is coming. And patch me through to the entire crew. The ship's internal communication system activated, carrying Sarah's voice throughout every deck and compartment of the Defiance. All hands, this is the captain. We are responding to an emergency that the rest of the galaxy has chosen to ignore. 47,000 Zephyrian colonists are dying in space, and we are the only ship close enough to help them. This is going to require everything we have, every skill, every ounce of creativity, every bit of courage that makes us human. We're going to save these people, not because it's easy, not because it's profitable, but because it's right. All departments, prepare for emergency operations. Shun out. The Defiance surged forward through space, its engines pushing toward their maximum sustainable burn. Behind them, other human ships were altering course, racing across the void to join what was already being called the most ambitious rescue operation in galactic history. In the depths of space, the Zephyrian colony ship Sanctuary continued its slow tumble through the darkness. Its people huddled in the few sections where life support still functioned. They had given up hope of rescue days ago, when it became clear that the Galactic Council had abandoned them to their fate, but unknown to them, humanity was coming. Not because of politics or treaties or trade agreements, but because 47,000 people needed help, and that was reason enough. The used Defiance streaked through hyperspace toward a rendezvous with destiny, carrying with it the hopes and determination of a species that had learned long ago that sometimes doing the right